Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Your Honours from the International Criminal Court, the members of the board of the Trust Fund for Victims has been meeting in the past 2 days, and they will continue tomorrow. But this evening we thought it might be a good occasion not only to invite you for a nice reception, but also to invite Ms. Rain, the chair of the board of directors of the Trust Fund for Victims, to say a couple of words about the current situation around the Trust Fund for Victims, not only in regard of the activities that we have been undertaking in the past 4 years, but also in regard of the possible challenge that may lie ahead of us in connection to a reparations phase in the Lubanga case. So please welcome Ms. Elizabeth Rain, the chair of the board of the directors of the Trust Fund for Victims.
Dear friends, you know there are no free lunches and there are no free receptions. And unfortunately, Peter was not telling the truth when he said that I'm just saying a couple of words. Because we, of course, are taking advantage of this fantastic possibility to tell to all of you a little bit about the Trust Fund and where we stand now, and what our plans are, what are we anxious to tell you, what is important, and so on. So I take, on behalf of the board, I take this opportunity. 4 years ago, the Trust Fund for Victims embarked on its quest for reparative justice for victims of crimes within the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court. That is justice for the victims of atrocity crimes committed on a large scale, sometimes by the very same persons who we looked upon for the protection now. We have seen children made into be combatants, and so into targets of the violence. Rape is used as a weapon to systematically destroy people's lives and identities too, as worthy members of the society, and so to also destroy the communities. Rape is a very, very good weapon, good in the sense that when you are raping someone, then you are raping at the same time the family, the community, who have not been able to protect their own girls and women. The Trust Fund for Victims may be mandated to assist these victims, but it does not have unlimited resources, something I have to remind about. Our programs depend on voluntary contributions, which are outside of the court's budget. In 2011, the total revenue of the fund from voluntary contributions was 3.2 million euros, the highest annual revenue ever. That is an excellent result, and we are extremely grateful, but we also realize that it's still quite modest. We are not ungrateful, on the contrary, but we have to look that these 3.2 still are not an enormous amount of euros. Yet, as the representative of the Trust Fund's board of directors, I'm proud to say that we are delivering value for the money. With an annual turnover of less than 3 million euros, including operational costs, we provide medical and psychosocial services as well as material support to more than 80,000 victims and their families. This is, of course, important information to give to you, our donors. You can also say 80,000 victims. What's that? There are hundreds of thousands, millions around. But these 80,000 must be seen as individuals who really are benefiting. But for us, the word value carries a deeper meaning. The Trust Fund for Victims aims to create value through the rehabilitation and reparation of victims. Because at the end of the day, international justice is as much about the hope, the dignity, and restoration of the victims as it is about the accountability of the perpetrators. We, of course, have to have the victims in our focus. Dear friends, on Wednesday last week, as we all know, Mr. Thomas Lubanga was found guilty by a trial chamber of the ICC for conscripting and enlisting child soldiers who were under the age of 15 into situations of active hostilities. The board salutes the court with this important result. It is the first time that the court has transformed the Rome Statute's mission of leadership accountability into the reality of a verdict. As a result, and also for the first time, the ICC will be considering the possibility of reparations for the victims of Mr. Lubanga. The Trust Fund for Victims may be called upon to activate its mandate to implement court-ordered reparations. And what does this mean? How does the ICC repair harm to the victims? That is a deceptively simple question, which hides many other questions that still remain to be answered. What kind of approach will be used to consider the victims of Mr. Lubanga individually, collectively, or both? We know about the crimes, but what kind of harm are we actually talking about? Then what kind of reparation should be thought about? And finally, how long will it take to meet the rightful expectations of the victims? Because there are a lot of expectations. Today, the board has talked at length about its role in meeting these challenges. You will, of course, appreciate that right now I'm not able to comment on the details of the Lubanga case, with so many issues still to be determined by the trial chamber. Please note that the Trust Fund filing on reparations to the trial chamber will soon be made available in a public version, just in a few days' time. We will also gladly provide further observations to the issues raised by the trial chamber in its scheduling order of the 14th of March. What I can do this evening is share with you some of the outcomes of our discussions during this week. We have been working really hard, and that is something we should do. The board reconfirms its interest to develop a fruitful partnership with the court in regard of its mandate to implement court-ordered reparations. The perpetrator pays. This is the financial construction for reparations at the heart of the Rome Statute. And we believe it should stay there too. The potential of the court and of the states parties to obtain assets of the accused for the purpose of reparations to their victims must be fully used. As the Trust Fund for Victims may find itself at the receiving end of this process, we do have an interest in the court's success in this regard. We urge that the states parties will assist the court in further developing the capacity to trace, freeze, and seize the assets that eventually benefit victims in a reparation phase. The second best option to finance court order reparations is to consider using the quite limited resources of the Trust Fund for Victims to complement a reparation award. I reiterate the board's position to that the Trust Fund for Victims is not legally liable to pay for such reparations in the same way as would be a convicted person. However, of course, the board fully recognizes that it does have the responsibility to manage the fund's resources in such a way as to be able to complement court-ordered reparations without prejudice against resources committed to funding the Trust Fund's victims' assistance mandate. To this end, the Trust Fund has maintained a reparation reserve, as you certainly very well know, for some years, that has been €1 million, and we have today decided to put €200,000 more to this fund, so there will be 1.2 from now on. I would like to remind you that this amount is intended for all eventual reparation awards in cases currently before the court, not just only the Lubanga case. In the coming period, the board looks forward to consult with the trial chamber in this Lubanga case so as to advise on the resources that we could make available and discuss the means how this could be done in the best way. Today, the board members have also reviewed the relevant regularly framework on the question how Trust Fund resources may be used for reparation awards. Our conclusion is that in principle, the Trust Fund's resources are intended to be used for collective awards to victims or awards to an organization. Tonight, with so many representatives of states parties present in this audience, and we are really grateful that so many of you are here, I would like to remind you that the Trust Fund may consider to call for funds that are specifically earmarked for reparations. We realize that already many of the voluntary contributions that we have received were indeed meant to also nurture the reparations reserve. For this, we are most grateful. We also think that more could perhaps be needed. Once the Trust Fund and the Trial Chamber have agreed on the outline of a reparation program, we believe that we can present to state parties as well as to interested private parties a much more specific and attractive opportunity to support the fund in carrying out its reparation mandate. Finally, on this issue of reparations, I wish to share with you a concern that in today's discussion came forward as being widely shared by the board of the Trust Fund for Victims. Reparation awards ordered by the ICC are of judicial nature. They speak to the individual criminal responsibility of a person convicted by the court. We all know that beyond the limitations of ICC reparations and even beyond the Trust Fund's assistance mandate, there will always be many victims in situation countries who may not be considered by the Rome Statute institutions. We cannot and should not expect that the ICC and the Trust Fund take over the responsibility of states to properly look after their own victimized populations. Governments in situation countries maintain the responsibility to ensure reparative, restorative, and transformational justice on their own territories. If so desired, the international community can play a supporting role. The Trust Fund for Victims may then serve as a source of experience and expertise too. Dear friends, the Board of Directors meet once every year in a formal session. That is what we are doing just during these days. But I absolutely can assure you that this is not the only time of the year that we are, so to say, switched on. In spite of the very honorary and voluntary nature of being a Trust Fund board member, throughout our mandate we have been very active in our support and guidance to the Trust Fund. We are aware of that the fund is continuously navigating uncharted terrain. I would like to acknowledge our gratitude to the leadership of our Secretariat, not to mention the whole staff who have been working so hard all the time here between and during our meeting to make it clear for us what are the necessary things to do and to give us also guidance. We have been kept informed all the time, allowing us also to speak on behalf of the Trust Fund, sometimes also on behalf of the ICC in different occasions where we are speaking to audiences. That is a possibility for us to advocate for the fund, for the ICC, and perhaps engage more different sources to help the victims of the atrocity, of the crimes that are within the jurisdiction of the court. Over the past 4 years, Trust Fund for Victims has made a tangible difference to more than those 80,000 victims that I already mentioned in DRC and in the northern Uganda. We have developed programs that assist victims to rebuild their lives and to regain their human dignity. I think that is so important. Later this year, the Trust Fund is looking forward to launch its program in the situation of the Central African Republic, initially focusing on victims of sexual violence. In the second quarter of 2012, the Secretariat will carry out its fact-finding mission to the situation in Kenya. On a daily basis, our partners, grassroots initiatives as well as international organizations, combine their collective knowledge and experience, often in very difficult circumstances, in support of the medical, psychological, and material needs of victims and their families. We take care to work with the most vulnerable groups, with the children, with the victims of sexual violence, that for us seems to be those who really are the most vulnerable. By way of the Rome Statute, the Trust Fund for Victims is locked into the International Criminal Court's quest to establish leadership and the leadership accountability for the most serious international crimes. The Trust Fund is therefore essentially a niche undertaking, not intended nor equipped to be a fund for all victims of all crimes in all places. And that's something that I have, and everybody of us has to answer on that question. Why are you not there? And why are you not there? There are victims also in that and that country in the world. This limitation is at the same time a strength. We, the Trust Fund's board, have the immensely important task to highlight the plight of victims of the mass atrocity crimes and to demonstrate that according to the Rome Statute, victims are not passive bystanders. Victims of mass crimes before the ICC not only have a stake in the quest for leadership accountability, they also have their right to be heard, to be recognized, to receive redress, and to rebuild their lives and regain their hope and dignity as human beings, not just as victims, as real human, dignified people. This is how we want the Trust Fund to make differences. We are inspired by the endeavors of the individual persons and communities, victims, partners, and their communities that we are engaging with. I do not want to end without a word of caution. The Trust Fund is fully aware of the current difficult financial climate that many states parties are facing. I wonder if anyone is not facing this financial climate. We are feeling in our own efforts to raise voluntary contributions. Yet the board has to acknowledge that the fund's operational capacity is already being quite stretched, even before engaging in the reparation mandate or further expanding its assistance mandate into to existing situation countries. If the current budgetary conditions around the Rome Statute institution persist, we foresee that the Trust Fund, perhaps already in 2013, may have to make some dramatic choices that may affect its capacity to deliver in both the reparation and the assistance mandates. I'm not threatening and definitely not trying to say that now or never, but I think it's good to just also admit the realities and some kind of threats to the very good development we have had, thanks to good efforts by everybody for the Trust Fund. So, dear friends, the Trust Fund for Victims hopes to inspire the court, the governments, NGOs, the international community at large, to join us on the journey, our journey of justice for the victims. And we are in need of help and inspiration of every single person and institution. You can all be inspiring us. We need that. I believe that together we can turn the Rome Statute's promise of reparative justice into a tangible reality for victims, for the families, the communities, and in one way for us ourselves, to get us, to give us the feeling that this is not in vain we are working for the victims, that we really can do something. As I said, it was not a couple of words, but I wanted just to engage you in this. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.